For the record, my name is Brian Worrell, District 4 City Councilor, and I'm the Chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. Today is May 13, 2025. It is 2:13 p.m. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings beginning in April and running through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. We will take public testimony after the panelist presentation. The full hearing schedule is on our website at boston.gov/council-budget. You can give testimony in person, here in the chamber, or virtually via Zoom. For in-person testimony, please come to the chamber and sign up on the sheet near the entrance. It will be taken at the beginning of this hearing following the panelist presentation. Individuals will be called on in which order they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. For virtual testimony, you can sign up using our online form on our Council Budget Review website or by emailing the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov or by emailing karishma.chauhan@boston.gov. That is karishma.chauhan@boston.gov. You will receive the Zoom link and your name will be added to the list. When you are called to testify, please state your name and residence or affiliation and limit your comments to a few minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. You can also email your written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov or submit a 2-minute video of your testimony through the form on our website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council's budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on dockets number 0822 through 0830, the FY26 budget for people operations in the election department. These matters were sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and referred to the committee on April 9, 2025. Today, I'm joined by my council colleagues in order of arrival, Councilor Flynn, Council President Louis Jen, and also Councilor Fitzgerald. I would now like to turn it over to today's panelists for them to introduce themselves and also to dive in to their presentation. The floor is now yours.
Thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Alex Lawrence, and I am the city's Chief People Officer. A sort of quieter part of my title that I haven't sort of said out loud as much as I'm actually the city's Chief People and Administrative Officer. And so I wanted to take a moment. This is the first time that People Operations has had a budget hearing since the cabinet was created about 3 or so years ago. We were created under this administration. Previously, a lot of the functions that we oversaw were overseen by the Chief Financial Officer. And so when we sort of took apart the human capital functions from finance, the administrative side from the finance side, we created the People Operations Cabinet. And so a lot of you, I've testified in the past talking about functions like our Human Resources and our Labor Relations Department. I do oversee those human capital functions, but additionally have overseen some administrative departments as well, including the registry. And so you've met Paul Chong as our registrar relatively recently. About a year ago, he was promoted to Commissioner of City Records, and we moved some additional administrative and incredibly important essential functions underneath him, including public records. And so I say all of that to explain that also more recently, we have moved the elections department under our purview, which is consistent with the other incredibly important and essential administrative functions that we oversee. It's something that we're really good at. And so under Paul Chong's leadership, we have the amazing elections department officials as well that you see here today. So just wanted to take a moment to reflect on our org chart to explain why these things make sense together. And in this year's budget, you will see that all of those functions fall under the People Operations Cabinet. So just wanted to explain that. We have an amazing team. We have our Executive Director of People and Culture here who oversees our Office of Human Resources. And then as we get more specifically into the elections portion of our presentation, I'll have the rest of the folks introduce themselves, but just wanted to take a moment sort of reflecting on our organizational structure and explain why this particular grouping of individuals is here today. So we're really excited to tell you about some really important stuff that we've done in fiscal year 25 and some goals that we have for fiscal year 26. I was able to participate in a vacancy hearing that we held earlier at the beginning of the budget process, where we were able to talk about some existing roles where we've been able to fill roles that have traditionally had high vacancy rates that have had an impact on service delivery. And we feel like our multi-pronged and individualized approach department by department has really helped us have success in filling those vacancies. We've also done a lot of work to overall streamline the hiring processes. We've shaved specific steps off the hiring process that were a little bit administratively burdensome and been able to just move things much more quickly throughout our process. We've also settled a lot of collective bargaining contracts that this honorable body has had the opportunity to vote on. And just some highlights from all of those contracts included larger wage increases to city workers at the lower end of the spectrum to really keep up with cost of living and make sure that all of our city workers are making a wage that is consistent with living in the city of Boston. We also made a really important change to policy, which allowed our employees to have sick and bereavement benefits during their probationary period. This was something that we had heard from employees was a serious barrier in their early days, and we know that family emergencies and becoming sick does not go along a calendar year, so something I'm super proud of that we were able to get done in this round of contracts. I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Hernandez, our Executive Director of People and Culture, to talk a little bit more about the work that People Operations and Human Resources accomplished this year.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here to be able to tell you a little bit about some of our accomplishments over the past year. This year, I was able to establish the city's first centralized organizational development team, and that team has launched new training and professional development opportunities geared specifically towards new and established managers, city supervisors, and department HR staff. In the current fiscal year, there's been 18 different learning opportunities and about 700 participants to date. We also implemented a code of conduct policy to establish clear expectations for city employees. We've designed and are launching a pilot for bilingual pay policy to support a pay differential to our non-union employees using one of the city's threshold languages in the course of their work. We successfully completed an ARPA-funded initiative that provided financial support to employees facing emergency housing crisis. And we've also launched a visa sponsorship program, and last year we were thrilled to have 100% success rate, so 7 of the employees submitted did receive their H-1B visa, and currently we have 10 employees who are pending. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. I just wanted to take a quick note on the overall numbers representing the diversity in our workforce. I've noted this in past hearings. The categories that we use to that are in a outdated system. I'm going to talk shortly about the improvements that we're making to this system, but our current human capital management system has fixed sort of outdated racial and ethnic categories. They conflate race and ethnicity and do not represent the entire spectrum of identities that our employees hold. That said, these are the categories that we have data on, so we're providing it for folks. But I just wanted to show very quickly, it's a little hard to read in this graph. It's hard to get one snapshot that tells a very nuanced story. But for basically every single category that we collect across, again, a slightly conflated race and ethnic categories, we have come closer to the population of Boston consecutively every year for the last 5 years. So I think it's a story that we're proud to tell, that our city workforce continues to more accurately reflect the overall population of Boston, and that's something we've been working hard to do. I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about our goals for fiscal year 26. One of the things that we're very excited that we've started in this fiscal year, but you'll really see more of the outcomes in the next fiscal year or the next two coming fiscal years, is that we've been developing and we're procuring a new applicant tracking system. So if you go to boston.gov/jobs and apply for a job centrally with the city, there will be a new sort of set of softwares and processes that both underlie that technology that you apply, as well as the technology that you will be used to be onboarded. And we think that this will really represent a really important and improved set of processes, and also allow us to collect better, more nuanced information on our employees and applicants as well. We're also, Brenda spoke a lot about spoke very briefly on our org development team, who's been rolling out a series of trainings for our supervisors and managers. This is something we're incredibly proud of, and we're going to continue to really expand that program. We're going to continue all the work that we've been doing with hiring and retaining and supporting our workforce. Specifically, one other new piece that you'll see in our budget this year that was not in the previous budget is employee resource groups that had been part of the equity cabinet's budget. And I think both us and the equity cabinet and the organization as a whole really believe that as the people operations team, we should be providing the core support services that support our employees. And so employee resource groups are a program that just makes, now that we have this structure, a lot more sense to live with us. So you'll see that reflected in our budget. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, with our organizational support and management of the elections department, that's going to be a huge priority for my cabinet. And so with that, I'm going to pass it on to our amazing elections folks to tell you a little bit about their work.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Ineda Tavares, Election Commissioner for the City of Boston, and I'm joined here by Sabina Pamonte. Do you want to? And Paul Trong. I'm going to let Paul do the introduction. Do you want to? That's what.
Sure. I'm Paul Trong. I am Commissioner of City Records and have been tasked by the administration and Chief Lawrence to support the elections department. We're looking forward to working with this body and our partners across the city to make the upcoming election the best one the city of Boston has ever had. With that, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Tavares to talk about some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Paul. So this year, well, I guess I'll dive into a little bit of the accomplishments that last year's elections, I think we saw some high voter turnouts during both elections. We saw a record number of, I think, poll workers and volunteers, as well as a lot of growth in our student poll worker initiatives. This year, the mayor's budget includes significant flexibility and operational improvements, given some of the challenges that we experienced last year. We are currently working with the elections group to identify just areas for improvement. One significant area that we are considering is the city has recently issued an IFB for the purchase of technology that we're hoping to implement for the upcoming elections season. So we're hoping to incorporate new technology for voter check-in and leverage all the features to really address some of the issues that we experienced, which were ballot tracking, real-time communications between the election department and the poll workers, and that added technology will hopefully also help to address most of the orders from the Secretary of State's office as well. The election department over the last few years, I guess we can go over to the next slide there. That. Over the last few years has seen a number of changes, legislative changes, and this is just kind of a timeline of some of the laws that have changed over the years. So from 2016 to 2018, we saw universal early voting implemented for all statewide elections, and during 2020, and I'll say in between that, we had citywide recounts. During 2020, we had the expansion of in-person early voting, as well as vote by mail in response to COVID. And then in 2022, those acts became permanent and also expanded early voting, not just for statewide elections, but also for municipal elections as well. And we also saw automatic voter registration. So the department is handling a much larger volume of voter registration forms because of the automatic voter registration. And then in 2024, now we're seeing a shift from what used to be mostly in-person early voting to now 30% absentee and vote by mail. So 11% early voters and 30% of those are coming in via absentee or by mail. So we're processing a lot more in-house, and we've been doing a lot of the same work with the same amount of staff. So we've seen all this growth and change in how we actually administer elections, and we actually have 3 different ways of administering elections now, with in-person early voting, vote by mail, and election day voting. But we haven't seen any increase in staffing. So we are looking for all the ways in which we can improve the department. And again, here are some of the numbers here. And the shift in how voting has actually shifted from 2016 to 2024. Do you want to add?
No, just on the next one.
All right, and I'll turn it over to Paul.
So one of the things that we are working on with the elections department is that the department is busy year-round preparing for elections, and it is a lean operation. It's an all hands on deck. The team is willing and ready to help with everything. And so when it comes time to mail out vote by mail applications, for example, the whole team pitches in to fold and to stuff envelopes and to make sure that our voters get that very vital, those vital materials. And so what that means is that we are working on building in a capacity for the department to not just do the work, but think about the way that that work is done and to implement changes. So we have brought on a manager of continuous improvement who does a process improvement, and that's really geared at increasing the capacity of the department to bring the expertise of people like Sabino, who's been an elections expert for, I think, longer than I've been alive, and Commissioner Tavares, and that was meant as a compliment to your ability, sir. But to bring those, the ideas and to leverage that experience into everyday operational improvements. And so we are just always looking for ways together to make the work better, and Commissioner Tavares is working closely with that manager of continuous improvement and the staff every day to bring new ideas to the table and to make them work for the people. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chief Lawrence.
Yeah, I think that's all for our presentation, but thank you so much, Council, for having us here today.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your service to the city of Boston. I'd like to also acknowledge that Council Braden, Council Coletta Zapata, and Council Weber have joined us. I'd now like to turn it over to my council colleagues in order of arrival for first round of questions, starting with Council Flynn. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the administration team for being here. I'm not going to focus on the previous election. I think I did what I had to do on the previous election. I notified the City of Boston Election Department that there were challenges. I worked with city officials. I worked with the Secretary of State's office. We held a hearing. Hopefully we're making improvements, and now my job is to advocate for funding for the election department so it is successful. So I'm not going to focus on that aspect of it. Other than to ask one question about the numbers that you provided, Commissioner. Is on elections by the numbers, do you have the numbers for 2017, 19, and 23? I was just curious about that. On the, like, the second to last page.
Yep. We can get those numbers for you. But we didn't have in-person early voting, Counselor, in 2017.
Okay.
Or vote by mail in 2017. Vote by mail really wasn't enacted until 2020. And then in-person early voting for municipal elections, I believe the first time we had that was that 2022? Municipal? 23? 23.
Okay, so I probably could get the 2023 number?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, through the chair, I'd just be interested in seeing that. Let me thank you to the election commissioner, and thank you for working with the election team to make improvements. Let me ask the other department. In your opening statement, you talked about the code of conduct policy. Can you talk about that and give me what that policy is actually about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say this is not exactly there's no completely new policy areas identified here. It is just a single source where people can understand a sort of things that are embedded in lots of different contracts and policies that talk to the sort of general behavior and expectations that we have in the workforce. So it outlines a number of areas. I don't have it right in front of me here, but about sort of what it means to uphold yourself as a public servant, what it means to have excellent communication, and really just outline some core principles that we think are important to adhere to in the workplace, and that allows us to be really explicit about what those are. So every city employee, we passed it through all of our collective bargaining partners. All of them agreed that these are reasonable expectations for our workforce. And so we have employees sign this as when they come on board, and we've added it to our annual compliance process. So every year, every city employee has a set of policies that they have to officially say that they have read and signed off on. And so this is now part of our annual compliance process.
And thank you. I think that's important work that you're doing in that field. So thank you for that. Let me ask a question. I am concerned about all city workers with this election. What is the guidelines you would have on city workers, whether they're city council employees or not, or people in the administration, or just regular rank and file city workers? What is the guidelines that you, as the top human resources person, are recommending people follow as it relates to time and attendance, and ensuring that your time and attendance doesn't impact with any outside work you're doing for a particular candidate?
Sorry, I'm not totally sure I follow the question. Do you mean like about political activity?
Yes, definitely.
So I think that in general, there's very clear instructions that come through our corporation council about what work is allowed to be done on city time, and that means that engaging in political activity while you are leveraging your time in City Hall is not compatible with political activity. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm totally answering your question.
No, that's exactly right. If you are a city employee, and a lot of people now are working remote, I should have preferenced that, people are working remote, but what is the requirement in terms of time and attendance? And say you're working remote 2-3 days a week, are you allowed to campaign for a particular candidate while you're supposed to be home?
If you are working, and that means from whatever your work location is specified, it doesn't matter whether that's in City Hall or in your home pursuant to the hybrid work policy, then you're actively at work and not using personal time, then you are not supposed to engage in political activity.
So tell me about then, and my question was the time and attendance policy. And I don't mean to be a stickler on these details, but I do think it does matter. How do you receive clearance prior to, from your supervisor, that you're able to take a day off to do whatever you want to campaign, but then knowing that that is going to be documented, but you just can't be out campaigning all day as if you're doing your job at the city?
So what I would say is that every single type of paid leave that you could take, and Brenda, I don't know if you want to add anything here, but has specific stipulations and rules around how you're allowed to do it. We don't, if you take vacation time, we don't inquire what you're doing, but there are certain rules, amount of time in advance, depending on what your collective bargaining contract you're a part of, or what rules are applicable to you, that tell you how much far in advance you have to collect that time. The rules are sort of clear about how you're allowed to use your time, but we don't specifically ask you whether you're engaging in political activity on your personal time as supervisor approves time off.
But for an example, could you take 3 or 4 weeks off to work on a particular campaign, and it's not documented?
I mean, you would, it sort of depends on the specifics of what you're asking here. A manager always has to approve time off per operational need of the department, and there are rules about how you could use your time. So, sorry, Brenda, do you want to add here?
Yeah, I mean, there are clear, as Alex mentioned, there are clear rules, and we make sure to every campaign season to give all employees that information. I mean, we expect all employees to follow our time and attendance policy year-round, which does require notice. When people are on PTO, that's their time. In terms of large chunks of time, it is always on a case-by-case basis, whether or not it would be paid time or unpaid time. So it's hard to give a blanket answer.
Yeah, I am concerned going forward that we ensure that the taxpayer money is spent appropriately, that people are doing the job of their official duties. I think that's important, in that when someone does have 1 day off or 2 days off, you know, that they're on vacation. But I don't do we anticipate that people are just going to take 4 or 5 weeks off and campaign for someone? Is that a scenario that you have envisioned?
I mean, managers have to sign off on time, and it would have to be operationally feasible for someone to take that amount of time. So I would say writ large, it's really not operational feasible for employees to take that amount of time off. I can't say blanket that that's never happened, but generally that's not something that we have concerns about. If there are abuses of time and attendance, that's something that each manager should be checking and making sure that they're abiding by our policies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Flynn. The chair recognizes Council President Louis Jen. Council, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you to this panel. Happy first budget hearing to the People's Cabinet, right? It's People's Cabinet.
People Operations.
People Operations. And we've been seeing a lot of each other in the Elections Department, both here and hearing, and because of the season it is, so thank you to the elections team for all the work you do. Commissioner Tavares, I think you talked about the new technology, and new technology, especially when it comes to voting, is a good thing, right? Because it's updating and making sure that, we had the hearing about 2 weeks ago, and working on snafus, getting rid of snafus, technology can be a way to help with that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the new technology that your department is investing in for voters. I think you talked about for check-in and about for other things, but can you talk a little bit more about it?
The department has considered a number of ways or technology that we can leverage to improve the process and the communication in the elections department. One tool is electronic poll books. We recently issued an IFB for. We are currently using.
I'm sorry, an IFB?
A request for bid.
Oh, okay.
That's just the procurement vehicle.
Okay,
An
sorry.
RFP. Yeah, sorry. But we.
Yeah. I'm familiar with another term, so that's
An
why I was
RFP,
confused.
the request for bid,
Yeah.
yes. So we reissued the request for bid for electronic poll books. We're currently using that technology as it stands for in-person early voting. And the communication features on the poll books will solve for a number of things. One component is the experience from the poll worker and voter perspective. So if a voter checks in and they're not at the correct precinct, they will now have access to the full database for the voter registration list for the entire city. It is still precinct specific, so they'll have to check in voters for their precinct, but they can now see where someone is registered to vote if they're at the wrong precinct, and they can give them turn-by-turn directions on the spot, as opposed to having to call the election department, cutting down on the number of phone calls that we would receive. We can also issue, the goal is to also use it for real-time communication as a backup, but also having multiple redundancies built in. They will keep their phones as they currently use them, but we'll use this as a backup communication system. If they need to get in contact with us, there's a texting feature on there, and where they can text us, or we can issue just a broadcast messaging across all 275 precincts. And then the other component is our ability to track ballots in real time. So as voters are checked in, we can now monitor from our end how many voters have been processed, how many ballots have been used, how many ballots we sent to the precincts, and things of that nature.
Great, and so will poll workers still have the paper backup as of the paper copies? I see Sabino.
If we go in this direction, yes, so there'll be multiple redundancies again.
Yeah, you said that, okay. You said multiple redundancies, thank you. Is that written in, so is that RFB, it says an RFB out, it's already part of the operating budget?
Yes, so you actually, we're using a transfer to spend FY25 money. So the budget that we have for this IFB is actually going to be FY25 funds in order for us to get this done in time for this election cycle.
Awesome, and we'll have it in time for this upcoming election. It'll
yeah, presuming that we award this IFB, so we're working in close collaboration, to interrupt, with the Secretary of State's office, so that is out there, and then we will make that final decision.
Great, so electronic poll books, cutting down on, probably hasten the process, give people directions if they're out there on precinct, which happens more than we would ever like it to happen. Multiple redundancies, so we have a paper backup in case the technology does what technology does sometimes and doesn't work. I think this is really great, and I think as much as I love going and seeing my poll worker, like looking for my name through paper, but I think this is a good upgrade, and I'm looking forward to us rolling it out and really supporting it. It sounds like we use it maybe in some instances, like Commissioner Tavares, you said early vote, we use it in some instances, but this is more of an expansion so that we can use it for all of our elections, prelim, general, if there are specials.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Chief Lawrence and Director Brenda. Yes, okay. Question about, like, it was the graphs on sort of like hiring, especially hiring by race, really interesting, and it's also really great to see the progress that we've made over the past 5 years, and that it's beginning to, we always want everything to reflect and look like our city. Of course, and this isn't going to be a critique, but I'm sure if you actually disaggregated the data and say like, okay, in what positions are people in order to do this work, in order to build the pipeline, a lot of the folks will probably still be in, entry-level positions, and we probably don't see that level of reflection in all areas. I imagine, if I'm thinking about this cabinet and what I know, so you'll probably have, at the top, the chiefs probably reflecting strong numbers, entry-level reflecting strong numbers, and probably somewhere in middle management, you sort of lack the diversity that we probably would want to see. Is that true? And what are we doing to ensure that there are pipelines for people to not only get jobs in the city, but retain being in the city and moving on? And then I have one more question that someone brought to me on Sunday on Mother's Day that I want to uplift.
Yeah. So we don't have those numbers, but I would suspect it's probably accurate, but we can definitely dig in and disaggregate a little bit more. It's something that we are absolutely thinking about. One of the ways that we're talking to departments, right? So it's always important to remember that we are decentralized HR, right? So I oversee the central office, but each department has their own personnel officer, HR department. And so part of my job is to ensure that the departments are aligned with the values of the cabinet. And so part of that, of course, is thinking about equity and equitable hiring. And so a lot of it is training departments to really make sure that they're putting this front and center in the work that they're doing. And also thinking about retention of our current employees and creating those pipelines, as you said, for areas of promotion, which I think a lot of our departments have actually done a really good job of really promoting from within.
Thank you. And then I appreciate that. And I know that Lorraine here in City Council always talks about the support she gets from HR. So just wanted to thank you for that as we look to build out our HR. One last thing I'm going to sort of say or comment, it's about civil service. It's about our civil employees here who need 100 years in order to retire and get their full benefits. Like both their age and their years of service with the city have to equal 100 years in order for them. Have we thought about, or has there been attempts to sort of look at that, what role that plays in retaining quality employees? I was at the Mother's Day Walk for Peace, and some city employees brought this issue to my attention, and I wanted to make sure that I elevate it because, if you're not 65 and work 35 years for the city of Boston, you have people who are working at the age of 70 still who want to retire but want to be able to also hit the 100 years. And flip side, right, if you're 40 and you work for the city for 20 years, you're like, do I stay here or do I go to the private sector and try to get more bang for my buck in retirement? So have we looked at that, and what are we?
Yeah, so I will say that specifically the retirement board the retirement schedule is statewide. So it's not City of Boston specific, and the retirement board does report up to our CFO, so I'm not super familiar, but the math that you're describing is true. And it definitely, the way that the calculator works, it really does incentivize those sort of last final years people to hold on for dear life at the end of their career, which is something some people really want to do, and others are really waiting to hit that 80%. So, it is definitely something that we're aware of. We participate in the entire statewide pension system, so changing that would be changing it for the state. As far as I understand it, I'm speaking slightly out of my level of comfort here because the retirement board, as I said, is a function of our financial side, but it's something we hear as well.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work you do. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Want to acknowledge that we've been joined by the Vice Chair of the committee, Council Pepin, and also Council Mejia. The chair now recognizes Council Fitzgerald. Council, you have the floor.
Chair, thank you very much. and thank you all for being here today. I'm inclined to not ask any questions so we can just get back to authorizing signatures for all of us to make sure we're actually on the ballot. We'll just speed this up. I don't want to waste your time here, guys. But at the same time, appreciate you guys being here and all the great work you do and the help for all of us that go along. I'm sure I can speak for all my colleagues when I say we thank you for all the guidance that you give us throughout this process. So appreciate that. In terms of the Office of People Operations, I noticed that we asked Alex that the filling existing roles that had high vacancy rates, what were the ones, was there any category of specific roles that were sort of better filled, or roles that what were we lacking and then what we filled, and then what remains as sort of like some of those jobs, if they are in groups like that? I know they can be spread out pretty thin, but I know when I think of like crossing guards at schools or hokies, every time we ask for those, there's always like, well, we have the jobs, but it's just not we're not attracting enough people to them. So I know those two categories. Just wondering if there's any more that we've made great progress on, like under those sort of categories, and any more that exist still.
Great, yeah, so at the, sorry, I was trying to pull up my slides.
No, take your
Vacancy
time.
hearing, where we talked a little bit more, diving in specific. So I think we specifically, a few of the places that we highlighted in that hearing was lifeguards, where we've made tremendous success, and that was a
Right.
huge problem. Parking enforcement officers, where the last couple of years we've been able to make tremendous success. And then I think the other one that we highlighted there was patrol officers. So those were all three places where we felt like we had really strong stories to tell. I would say across our Boston Center for Youth and Families is still a place where we have a decent number of vacancies that we're working really closely. Brenda, I don't know if there's anything else that comes to mind, but yeah, I think Hokies is a place where we actually made a ton. We got additional headcount and filled those tremendously as well. So a lot of places to be proud of. I think more at this point, it's like smatterings of specific individual hard to fill positions.
Yeah, any reason why BCF specifically, or is it just?
I think the volume is just like one of our largest departments. And a lot of the positions are seasonal in nature. And so I think that's part of getting
yep.
those positions filled, yeah.
No, understood. That's great. Otherwise, I think, listen, honestly, great presentation. I don't know. Is there any, in terms of improvement, I know we talked about the goals that you put out there to better hire, retain, and support, but yeah, honestly, I think you guys are fine. I really don't have many more questions. I appreciate you guys offering your time, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council Fitzgerald. The chair recognizes Council Coletta Zapata. Council, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. It's good to see the Elections Department back here. I have limited questions for you, maybe one or two, but I'll start with people operations. Thank you so much for your work. I appreciate Chief Lawrence, East Boston resident, always for the work that you do. Thank you, Sabino, also East Boston resident. I'm sorry, somebody up here is also a District 1 resident. I'm very proud of D1 and all the contributions of our staff here. The Code of Conduct policy, it basically is a policy that was written and dispersed how to treat people with respect and civility. Is that correct?
Yeah,
That's
I would
a big
say
part of it.
Yeah, a part of it. Just what we sort of believe to be appropriate workplace conduct.
Okay, excellent. And that was, I know that it was passed around to some of our CBA partners. How is it distributed to all employees, including managers?
Yeah. So we start with our HR personnel officers. As I mentioned, we meet with them monthly, and so making sure that they are up to date, distributing as well. We send out communication to all staff, and as Alex mentioned, we have annual compliance going on, so it was part of the annual compliance. So employees were notified that this was something they would be signing on to during annual compliance, and then all new employees sign off at time of hire.
Okay. That's not something that management would get training on, correct, or would they?
We've done robust manager training, and so introducing the policy during our manager training is one of the policies that we do share with all of our managers.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, what I would just highlight here, sorry, is that we are playing catch up in our what we're now calling our new supervisor orientation. So prior to the last 2 years, we had trainings and we had management programs, but we didn't have a supervisor orientation that all people, as they become supervisors, go through. We're in the process of scaling that. And so as people become supervisors, but also sort of catching up, we've had folks who are participating in this who've been supervisors for 20 years, and they're saying, I wish I had this 20 years ago when I started, but I'll take it now. And so the code of conduct is one of the policies, one of many policies that we are now incorporating into this supervisor training, and I think it's something we're feeling very proud of and wish we could scale up faster.
Nice, and it's necessary, just given the polarization of our society and political views. While we may not agree, we can always treat people with dignity and respect, and so as long as both the staff and management are getting that, I think that's excellent, so great work. Can you talk about the supervisor and management training in general and some of the new initiatives that you've introduced in the last year?
Sure. I mean, so we've done, as Alex mentioned, the new city supervisor training. We've also done mediation training for our HR and personnel officers. We've done training for our front-facing workers on conflict,
Yeah, so we've also been doing de-escalation training, which is something that a lot of our city workers were specifically requested. And so this is a place that we've invested significantly. We've also been sort of doing some experimentation on individual level with individualized management coaching for employees who have asked for that and have found that it's been extremely, extremely helpful.
Nice. I love hearing that. Is that something that the city council has access to as well, or will that have to come through the council president's office and therefore central staff?
It probably would. I'd have to double check.
Okay. That would be awesome if we can just make sure that, I have told my staff if they want professional development or if they feel like they want to expand their skills, management included, they should look to the newsletter that's sent out quite regularly and look on the hub for those opportunities. My computer just died, so I don't have the exact question that I so eloquently had typed out, but it has to do with the elections department and the money that you may or may not need with this budget. I think, simply put, the way that I can say it most succinctly is, if you were to be given more money, could you use it? Will you use it? Like, how much money do you think that, because we have an amendment process here, right? And I understand that everything goes through OBM. I think given everything that's happened in the last couple months and years, especially with new technology, and we were talking about the operational capacity of everything that you may or may not need to do with the Secretary of State's office. I feel like it's been said multiple times on this council floor, which is why I wanted to bring it up. But even with your allocation from OBM, do you want more money and do you need it?
We could always use more money, and I can definitely find ways to use it.
Yeah, if I can here, obviously they have much more in-depth experience and knowledge in terms of how we would use it, but I would say that, we feel confident that we can get done run a solid, good election this year and meet the Secretary of State's orders, et cetera. But I think we know that we are behind, and even just sort of we're doing lots of things manually and by hand. And so we believe that sort of incremental investments in this department could be well spent on supplies that would help us do even better and do more with what we have.
I think in particular, and in no particular order, and understanding that we haven't vetted these things, we could use more delivery equipment, whether those are trucks. We could use more staff. It's a very physical job that involves moving things from 400 frontage road out to 270 different locations. We could use more communications equipment, including radios or smartphones. We could use, if we do proceed with electronic poll books, there's peripheral equipment that we could use, and not just extension cords, but things like backup batteries. So the list goes on and on and on, and we would be pleased to work with this body to detail what those investments would go towards, but we would put it to great use.
Awesome. And I appreciate your detailed response. I think this is certainly a priority of mine through this process. This council has been given this newfound authority, and it is something that I think is in the best interest of Boston and just administering elections and delivering democracy for folks. So thank you for your work, and I appreciate everything you do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Coletta Zapata. The chair now recognizes Councilor Braden. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's see. The Position Review Committee controls all the citywide hiring. Does it also include review hiring at BPS?
BPS does not go through the PRC process the same way that other city positions do.
And so we had a hearing with the libraries last week, and they were saying, that there's back in 2015 there was a report, Chrysalis Management report, about operational and financial assessment, and one of the issues that was coming up, how long it takes to hire on board someone, even though the library is happy with the applicant, they think it's a great fit for the job. The whole thing takes 6 months to complete, and by that stage you maybe have lost a really good candidate. Is there a way to speed that? And I also think, if positions in every other department in the city are scrutinised like this, I'd also like to see some higher level of scrutiny of what's essential and what's not essential in BPS. Now that may be a very controversial comment, but I'm looking at the full-time equivalent changes for the budget books going back to 2003, and very often the priority area is education every year, year on year on year on year. So, every other department is scrutinised to a very high level. And I'm not saying that the educational department at BPS don't know what they're doing and they're not hiring good people, but it takes their 1/3 of the city budget. So that might be a really controversial statement to make, but will this new system will it improve the turnaround times for bringing on board new people?
So I would say we've already done quite a bit to improve hiring times. It's hard to give you an exact unit of measurement, but for the PRC process, we've shaved about 5 or 6 days on average off of that process. We've removed a couple of steps that we determined to be duplicative that are really helping speed that along. And I feel like this is just something that we're really proud of is the fact that we've shortened some of those times that you're referring to from that NPL report.
Because I know last year we did recommend some departments get some extra staff for something, and I know that the PRC process was long and laborious, and money that we appropriated in June wasn't really put to use until much later. So any way we could speed that up, because I do hear of people applying for a job and then not even getting a call back to say, weeks on end, and just go away and get a job somewhere else, because, it's that sort of process, like even just the courtesy of a call back to say, well, we have this process, we're processing your application, but just let them know that they're recognized. I know that's maybe a harsh criticism, but I think it's really important. I'm really delighted to see that we're working on professional development in the middle management space. I think it's really important to advance talent and keep people here that they can see themselves having a career in city government, for a career, for a lifetime, and there's so many different departments to work in. One concern I have is about just retention of, adequate replacement strategies for a lot of folks who are retiring or leaving, in terms of, certainly in areas like ISD and some of those more specialist areas, in terms of bringing new people in and then getting the benefit of all that institutional memory for the folks that have been here for 30 years or whatever. Are we developing a mentorship program or some way to try and capture that knowledge and know-how from the folks with long-standing experience with the new folks? How does that work?
department does their own hiring. So each department approaches it a little bit differently. So I think the two approaches that I've seen are either being able to hire folks on early so that there's overlap, so that they have time to work with the current incumbent and learn from them directly, or extending them for a little bit of a longer time so that they can establish processes, document things before they leave. And we've seen both of those be really successful in turnover, but developing more standardized practices for how to do this is definitely something that we've been thinking about.
Yeah, very good. And then, Chief Lawrence, you're the Chief Administrative Officer. Is this your new title?
So I was explaining at the beginning, when we divided the chief financial, when we created the People Operations Cabinet, I've sort of technically been the Chief Administrative Officer in the whole time. We've sort of shortened it to Chief People Officer, but in explaining the elections piece, I was saying that I am technically the Chief People and Administrative Officer of the city.
And so, what does that mean? Like, there's no change in operations. Like, what does that mean? Is there a director of administrative services then, or how does it all?
Yes. Sorry, let me explain that a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
So, previously to the creation of this cabinet, all of the financial and administrative functions reported up to the CFO. When we created the People Operations Cabinet, a lot of the administrative functions were financial in nature, so they moved to report under the CFO because they were financial administrative functions. There were additional functions, like, for example, vital records and the registry, birth, death, and marriage, that I have overseen since I've been in this role. Mm-hmm. So I had the registry as well as the centralized People Operations Office, the Office of Human Resources, and the Labor Relations Office. And then in the creation of the city records role, we also moved public records under that purview because it made sense to sort of sit administratively within that role. And then the addition of the elections department is just a further expansion of that.
That's good. And the tracking system, tell me about the new applicant tracking system. How does that work? Like, as again, part to the other question I asked about onboarding and recruitment.
Yes, so there are we currently have a platform that is what employees use when they apply to jobs. So if you go to boston.gov/jobs and you've applied to a city job, you've leveraged our current technology. We will be switching out that technology and then also sort of expanding some of the components that we currently use to make a better onboarding process. So we're implementing a new software in partnership with Do It, but as part of that project, we're undertaking a lot of process improvements to just make that process better. So Councilor Braden, you alluded to, for example, employees knowing where they are in a hiring process. We hope that right now, it's not that our system doesn't have the capacity, it's that we don't use it consistently across every single department. Mm-hmm. So we're making a bunch of process improvements as part of this that will allow us to have much more standard ways that employees, job applicants, and actually our employees, once they're onboarded, receive just much more sort of consistent and clear information across departments, and will provide we are improving the guidance and the usage of our current system, and this implementation will really allow us to double down on some of that.
That's great, because I think that'll improve the user experience and address some of the concerns I already talked about. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. The chair now recognizes the vice chair of the committee, Councilor Pepin. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here today for this great panel. I am very thankful for the work you all do, and especially to the elections department. I know you guys are very busy right now, and we'll be busy throughout this year, so thank you for just being here. I'm curious, what portion of the budget do you guys have for initiatives for voter education, and how do you guys roll that out throughout the year?
I don't know exactly what portion, but we do have funding that goes towards a number of outreach and education. So one major piece is the mailing of our early voting flyers. That is something that we took on probably in about 2020, 2019. So we mail every single household a flyer just to inform them. There's to bring awareness to the actual election with the schedule of all of the early voting locations, as well as their election day polling location. That's something that we started under my leadership, as well as mailing out the vote by mail applications. That's just another way to put it on everyone's radar that there is an election coming. We started that process, I believe, for a municipal election maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then the state also started doing it statewide for all elections after the implementation of in-person early voting. We are tabling at events, so that's overtime hours that are going towards staff members, maybe tabling at events or attending resource fairs over the weekend. We're hiring BPS students. Our student poll worker program has seen a significant increase. We had a record number of 90 students participate during the last election. I wish all of them showed up, but 90 of them actually participated during the election. So there's just a number of ways that we are targeting outreach.
Nice. And that goes to all registered voters in the city of Boston?
Yes.
Nice. Nice. Do you have any special initiatives for lower turnout regions in the city?
So unfortunately, because we are the elections department and not a get out the vote organization, we distribute our efforts equally across all precincts.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarity. In regards to your poll workers, do you conduct trainings for them? If so, how often? And again, how much money is set aside for this?
Do you know off the top of your head, what do we have in our emergency personnel fund? Okay, probably almost $1 million in our emergency personnel funds, but that also goes towards overtime. We do conduct training before every single election, so we're required to train our poll workers at least once during the election cycle. Sometimes we are training them twice, and right now we're approaching training with having online component, and then there's a hands-on piece to our training for all of our wardens and our clerks. We are looking into training and improving that process as well. So whatever improvement we decide or whatever communication plan we land on is going to be incorporated into our poll worker training, which will in turn increase the number of trainings we will offer our election officers. So if we're going to be implementing new technology, our plan is to have either a lengthier training and compensate them for that, or having a separate set of trainings so that they all receive the hands-on training on how to leverage the new technology.
That's great. And I know that Councilor Louis-Jean already asked this question, but I think I missed the answer. When do we expect the new technology to be implemented?
We have not decided on a vendor yet. I think we received a couple of responses, so we're still going through that process.
Okay. Is there a deadline for it, or it's like an ongoing process?
So we have issued the IFB, and there's a process for that IFB that we're working through with not just the administration, but the Secretary of State. And so we have been working hand in hand with them. So the deadline for making a decision for a purchase order and a contract would be in the beginning of June. But we want to make sure that we're moving in lockstep with our state partners. And so there's going to be some back and forth about the technology and the implementation timelines.
Okay. No, that's great. I'm genuinely excited for this. Obviously, whenever any new system is being proposed in the city of Boston, I think it's a good opportunity for us to just advance as a society, and hopefully it works perfectly. So I want to stay up to date on when we will potentially see this happen. But
we look forward to sharing as much information as we can. Again, I think one important factor is that we don't want to get out ahead of our state partners, but we will definitely keep this body up to date.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that. And the last question that I have for you all is, I remember one of my first opportunities in democracy was to work as a poll worker. And I think, we got paid, what, $110 for the day, I think was the exact number. What's the number for you that a volunteer or a poll worker gets paid for an election day?
Don't quote me, but we did increase that number. We increased the training pay, which was once upon a time $15 for the training to $30, and then we also bumped up everyone. I believe it's $210 for wardens and clerks, or $275, $210 for clerks, and maybe $275 for wardens, somewhere around that ballpark. I can get the exact numbers for you.
Okay, that just means being a political geek, and just being appreciative of those opportunities to our residents, and just very thankful to all the poll workers out there that sign up to work during the elections, and obviously to your staff. Thank you for the work you all do. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councilor Pepin. The chair recognizes Councilor Weber. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's the last time I buy donuts for your staff, Chair. Thanks for skipping me. So I have some questions about health insurance. I don't know who wants to talk about that, but and maybe I missed the beginning of your presentation. Maybe you went over this, but so we're looking at like a 20% increase in the cost from fiscal year 24 to today. It went from 211 million to 251 million. I guess so. What's driving that to start, and then I have some other questions.
I can't speak to it right at this moment. I can definitely get back to you with specifics from our director of HBI.
Okay, and then so my another question is just sort of health insurance 101. What do we do when do we negotiate that every year? Is there a vendor? Do we just go through the state? How does it work? And maybe how is it different than a private company's health insurance?
I can't speak to how it's different, but we do work with a vendor, and we also work with our union partners every year to look at the amounts and what's driving, whether it be different medications or whether it's particular surgeries and things like that, and then we make a collective decision.
Yeah, you're seeing us pause here because just the world of health insurance and health benefits is so extremely complex. We have an incredibly talented director of health benefits who we rely on to really do this analysis for us and make sure that we're articulate about it. But the entire process, there is a group that Brenda was alluding to, the Public Employment Commission, which is a group of all of our union partners that have representation that come together and meet monthly with our health benefits office as well as our health benefits consultant to review the figures. We sign an agreement that this body signs off on every sort of 5 years, which stipulates all of those provisions, and work with them to make any of the changes that we're making.
Yeah, and so just to translate the word vendor, because it doesn't, I've heard other people refer to this. I was talking to somebody who runs HR for a private company, and they said they have a vendor. But so when so that just is, it's sort of like the insurance salesperson, or no?
Sorry, no. We have a consultant partner that works closely, just because health benefits is so specialized, that works with us to provide us sort of expertise on what municipalities do, and so we publicly publicly bid this out for an expert consultant that works just super collaboratively with us to make all the decisions we make. So we're not outsourcing the provision, we just bring in some expertise to help make decisions.
And then do they present you with several plans, or do you end up just going through one sort of, is that the insurance vendor do you get to compare, different plans, or is it just, it's basically like, okay, if you want to maintain this level, it's going to be this much. If you God forbid, you feel like you need to reduce the amount of benefits that you have available, how does it work? And I don't, be as specific as you want, but I think I could just use some basic information for how this works.
So yeah, it is something that we sometimes do, which is switch our providers. We currently have 2 choices of health insurance providers that our employees can choose and a number of plans they can choose between. I think it was a few years ago that we switched out one of those vendors sort of in consultation with this consulting partner that we were describing. So there's an entire team that is constantly doing this analysis with our budget office to make sure that we're getting the best possible deal for the organization, and sometimes that does include switching a different insurance provider.
I mean, so just being in that conversation, do we have like bargaining power in these conversations, or is it, anyway, what's your answer to that?
I mean, we're a very large employer, so I think yes, our particular plan is rich in benefits, and we're able to do that largely because we're a large employer.
Okay, and yeah, I guess so. I would like to hear about why the last 2 years it's jumped, and these kinds of things just seem to go in one direction, and and I'm not saying there's anything we're doing wrong. I think people have questions, and I'd like to be able to answer them. And then I guess for the elections department, so for the designee receiver, do we pay for that? Does that come out of our budget? Do you know? Or,
No.
Okay. And then I was reading. One of my constituents just wrote a book on Mayor Ray Flynn and talking about his election in '83 and the Flynn-Mel King election. It was like 70% of eligible voters voted in that election. It was more people voted, like dating back to the 40s when we had, like a third more people. Do you think we could handle an election if 70, because more recently it's more like 25, 30, 35%. If we had 70% of the electorate turnout in November, can we handle that?
Well, I believe we had 60 for the last election, and the answer is yes, we can handle it, and that's 60 with a lot. We're at record voter registration now, so we're about, I think, over 430,000 registered voters at this time, and we saw 60%. So I think that if we did see 70%, we could certainly handle it.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, in terms of getting all the ballots out, which is going to be the new policy, I mean, that if everyone shows up to vote, the ballots will be in place?
We will have ballots for 100% turnout available during every single election, so that if we had 70% turnout, there would be a ballot for every single voter available.
Okay, and then just last quick, in terms of it seems like, there a lot of people have come out to run in a couple district races and at large. How does this compare to other years where we have, I think it's 17 people sign up so far to run at large, or at least 15 to 17, and I think District 7. How's that historically? Maybe Sabina wants to answer that in terms of number of people in all these different races, and how are you handling this?
We definitely are seeing a higher number of interest in running this year, but I will let Sabina speak to the historics.
Well, in my years here, this is high and it's different only because there's not a lot of open seats. So with the incumbents still running for re-election, and the participation or the increase of participation is unique to this election here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council Weber. The chair now recognizes Council Mejia. Council, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. And 60%, Commissioner, of folks voted in the last election? Wow, that's not bad. Look at people doing your civic duty. That's encouraging. Now, we have to repeat that. I always say voting is like, it takes 6 years to turn a non-voter into a super voter, because it really is about exercising that muscle. And I think that the more people recognize the power of their vote, the more engaged they become. And so, the theory and my hope is that everybody recognizes their power, regardless of who is who they're voting for, but that I tell people, put your own name on the ballot, even if you don't like any of us, because at the end of the day, that's how resources pour into our neighborhoods. So it's less about the candidate, it's really about just making sure that you count. And I think that that's a message that is important for me to get out to folks, that our resources are really oftentimes determined by the neighborhoods that go out and vote. And so I say, write your own name on the ballot if you don't like any of us, but just vote. So thank you for your service and for your work. I probably will have 2 rounds of questions, just so you know. But I'm going to start with the people's cabinet of culture and all that good stuff. And I still need to understand the dynamics, because Peter, you're new, and you fall under, no, he's not new. Is he new? He's new to me. I don't know. No, for the record, he's new to me. But he's under your leadership? Under
my cabinet, yeah.
Okay. And you also have taken over the elections department under your cabinet?
So yes, the cabinet, the elections department is now under the purview of the People Operations Cabinet.
And that is because?
So I was sort of giving a little bit of an overview at the beginning here, but basically we have a lot of these, there are other centralized administrative functions that we oversee, and generally we felt like we would, the administration believed that we would be best positioned to support this organization through this transition, given the fact that we run other complex operational departments and really have with us expertise in supporting departments through administrative changes. So everything we do is a combination of designing a plane, flying a plane, and building a plane. I know it's such a cheesy thing to say, and all of our departments do that to some degree, but I really think that is in a lot of ways the challenge that we have ahead of us here under this very specific context. I think the elections department is amazing. They have amazing leadership and have done incredible work with very little over the years, but really doing that organizational change work is something that takes a tremendous amount of muscles and resources from the organization. And so I think the administration believed that this would be a place where we could do that. The law department, which is where they reported previously, is an incredible department. They provide excellent legal guidance, but they don't have as much day-to-day operational work that they do, or process improvement work. That's something that we do on a regular basis. So we thought that the administration believed that this made sense.
And I'll just, in full transparency, I don't really know much about how you go about making your decisions, but I will say, and I will say for the record here publicly, is that, you know, we often find ourselves pointing fingers, but what we don't do enough of is really looking at the investments we make in departments and making sure that they are fully resourced so that they can execute, right? So while I understand this conversation, shuffling people from one department to the next is, I'm going to assume, is part of the infrastructure, but I also think investments in the elections department could get us to where we need to be without having to be homeless and defined and, you know, be in a different space. So I'm not saying that there's a problem, but I'm just saying that we need to invest to make sure that the elections department is well-resourced. And so I am curious about a few things. And I asked this question yesterday, but then I was told it was under your preview, Alex. We worked on the Fair Chance Act. Is that, okay, that was you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just curious, can you give me any updates or some data points that can, you know, talk about the impact that this legislation has had so far on municipal employees in terms of moving up the ranks, women in particular, and people of color?
So the Fair Chance Act was the ordinance that created the Director of Diversity position, which is in my cabinet.
Yep.
And we have been able to get a lot of incredible work done, specifically in recruiting hard-to-fill positions and ensuring that there has been, that we continue to hire and retain diverse talent. So I showed specifically at the beginning that across every, I always want to give a caveat that our racial and our race and ethnicity categories that we collect in our current system are not perfect and not exactly what we would want. They conflate race with ethnicity, so I always want to just give that caveat when I'm speaking about this data. But across each race and ethnicity category that we collect, we have steadily made progress in making sure that our workforce more adequately reflects the population of Boston, and that has been under the leadership of our Director of Diversity that has made a bunch of centralized improvements to help that work continue to grow. It is also a great credit to our tremendous...
Okay, Alex, I only got 2 more minutes left, but, so it's going good.
I would say it's going well, yes. And we're actually, the occupant of that current position has moved to another amazing job within our administration, so we're going to bring on someone new in that position as well.
Thank you. So this is why I'm going to probably need 3 rounds. So I'm curious, you know, this is a culture thing that I've been hearing from some folks, and you just got to take what you hear with a grain of salt because you just don't know how true it is. But there are some folks who are quietly whispering in spaces and places that they don't feel like they can be fully expressed here in the administration, or at least in certain spaces. And I'm curious how you deal with incidences of people feeling bullied or coerced. What does that look like here?
It's hard to address instances that we are not aware of, right? So I think always encouraging.
And people are not reporting because they fear retaliation.
Right. I understood, right? But I think without it, it's hard to take action. I think that we understand that a lot of the work that needs to be done is culture work in the departments. As I've mentioned several times, we're a decentralized HR, and so part of my job is to work very closely with the various HR personnel officers and how to establish themselves as a person that folks can come to in order to share. And if not, we have an employee relations team that's amazing that they can go to as well, that's centralized. And so we've seen that utilization grow in the last, couple of years since it's been established. So folks are finding them in order to...
Do you do exit interviews, like when people leave here?
It's something that we're working on. We haven't.
I think that we could learn a lot
Absolutely.
about the folks who are giving up an opportunity to have a pension because they just don't feel like this is an environment that feels comfortable. So in my next round, I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper into some of the things that I think as we continue to have these conversations from a training perspective, there's an opportunity for us to do some work in regards to the budget as it relates to just the culture and the climate that exists within this building right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilman Mejia. Again, thank you for being here and all the work that you do for the city. And also thank you to my council colleagues for all their great questions. The mayor added, and this is for the elections department, the mayor added $750,000 in the middle of the current fiscal year for elections. Can you talk to me what that money was allocated for?
Yes, so that money specifically was for the allowing us to post this invitation for bid for the poll pad technology that we were describing.
Okay, thank you. And then how many people are staffed on election day for emergency issues?
It depends where. So in our department, we have our full-time staff members as well as a number of volunteers that we're recruiting throughout the city. For the last election, we recruited about 50 volunteers that were staffed at various locations, but we also use the Emergency Operations Center. Elections Department is one of the only other departments outside of their standard emergencies and the marathon, I believe that the emergency operations stands up the operations center for. So in there we have fire, police, EMT, we have members from BCYF, BPS, and all stakeholders across elections that we use for if a polling location is not set up on election day or if we can't access it for whatever reason, lighting. So there's a variety of areas where we're actually staffing for emergency response.
Thank you. And then back to the people operations. Per page 11 of the RFI, there was It says, designed a pilot for the bilingual pay policy to support paying a differential to non-union employees using one of the city's threshold languages in the course of their work with constituents. Can you talk a little bit more about this pilot, how this pilot has impacted workers so far, and is there any potential to extend such supports to other underpaid city employees as a means for achieving greater pay parity?
Yes, thank you so much for asking about this program. So I can't tell you about any of the success because we have we're going to be sending a notice officially implementing this program in like days.
Okay.
Still super new, and we're piloting it with non-union employees just to get us a chance to sort of understand and better understand the costs around this program, better understand the utilization around this program, and understand how it could work. But the reason we're calling it a pilot is because our goal would be to expand it across the workforce.
Awesome. And when you had the policy ready, could you just share that with all our counselors?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think folks should be getting an email fairly shortly announcing the sort of specific details around the policy.
Awesome. And just want to just give credit and shout out Council Mejia on a ARPA-funded initiative that provided support to employees facing emergency housing crises. Can you describe, the successes of that program, and is there any plan for extending this work now that ARPA funds have dried up?
Yeah. Sorry. Brenda had to step out for a moment, but if we can circle back to provide you more details on the program. I would say that it was a successful program, and we were able to help employees through many emergency housing situations. I will say that I do think one of the learnings from this program is that an employer, there were definitely, we sort of heard some feedback from employees that involving the employer in some of their individual life details and situations was a sort of challenging and awkward dynamic. And so I think, administratively, we're not particularly well positioned to run programs like this. So I would say it was a success in the sense that it really allowed us to learn a lot about which pieces of this that we're good at, which is like sharing information about programs and making people understand resources that are available to them. I think in the future, our hope would be that we would be able to have our employees participate in programs through the Mayor's Office of Housing and Rental Assistance, other programs that are just offered more generally to the public, just because we are not particularly well positioned to design and implement this level of complex employee-facing programs. We ended up working really closely with the Mayor's Office of Housing because there's just so much detail around housing that we are not experts in. So they ended up supporting us through a lot of this work and are just way better at providing, understanding some of the documents that employees would submit to us. So I would say it was a really helpful and interesting experiment, and we're super grateful for it. And I think fundamentally believe that that residential relief through the Mayor's Office of Housing is the best place to provide all Boston residents with programs like this.
Awesome. And then when it comes to diversity work, on page 130, the People Operations talks about the equity work that they do here in the city of Boston. Can you talk about how you work with the Equity Cabinet on diversity in your role?
Sure, yeah. We work really closely with the Equity Cabinet. They established a program educating staff, and so I am on one of the planning committee for that to make sure that it's aligned with things that are happening in the People Operations Cabinet. So working really closely to make sure that if there are any employee issues that come up during those trainings, that we are there. And if issues arise, we work really closely with the entire cabinet to make sure to resolve those, whether they involve issues of equity or not.
All right. And then for the Elections Department, on page 13 of your RFI, you talked a little bit about the partnership with Boston Public Schools. The department recruited and trained a record number of students who served as Election Day poll workers. 70 students served during the November 5th, 2024 state election. Additionally, the department held 59 voter registration drives at various high schools and events across the city. Could you just talk to me a little bit more, elaborate on that initiative and program, on what schools, and then is this something that we plan on continuing in the future?
We do plan on continuing that for future elections. That initiative started in 2017, 18, I believe, and then it kind of dropped off because of COVID, and then we picked it back up again. It's a collaboration between the Elections Department and Boston Public Schools. We are targeting every single school, and that number actually should reflect 90. We had 90 students serve, and we've gradually increased. When we first started, I believe it was 40 students participating. Now there's 90 students, and we used to see that the students were coming mostly from Latin Academy and O'Brien. Now we're seeing kids across the city from just a variety of schools. I know ACC had a good turnout there. So we're really targeting every single school and where we can actually get the students. It usually runs through someone at BPS who circulates it through all of the guidance counselors. So we're really targeting every single school across the city.
Thank you. I'll now go to my council colleagues for second rounds of questions, starting with Council Braden. Council, you have the floor.
Last one standing. Thank you. And I'm really curious. I see in the visa sponsorship program, I came here on a visa myself, so I'm curious, how does that work with City Hall? And do we have to retain an immigration lawyer to process their papers? And do we sponsor them after that to get a green card? And yeah, that's sort of all of the above.
Yeah, so right now we're focused on the H-1B visa specifically, so it has to be current employees who hold a different work authorization, and we absolutely have an immigration attorney. As we know, this is highly specialized work, and so we do have an immigration attorney that we're working with.
And what countries of origin, like how do we recruit folks on a H-1 visa? How do we get them here? I know I responded to an ad in a physical therapy magazine years ago, but how do we get them here, and do we sponsor them for green cards?
So we haven't yet expanded to green card sponsorship. So again, we sort of started with H-1B as a pilot. We've expanded that and made it a permanent program, but we haven't yet explored green card sponsorship. These are employees who have applied on their own to various departments hired by those departments, so it's not an explicit recruitment tool as of yet. Right now, it's just open to current employees.
Okay, and so they're sort of folks who are living here already, and they're, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and in terms of the management information systems, I know DoIT is doing a fabulous job upgrading us, modernising us. I think some of the clunkiness that we find in our information technology is that it was designed, custom made for the city of Boston way back in the midst of time. I don't know how long ago, and all the code was written specific to this, but it's not like a generic. It's difficult to get upgrades and all of that. Is that part of the issue, or how do we? What is our ongoing investment in for your departments in particular, management information systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I spent 7 years in DoIT. We work extremely, extremely closely with them. And I think your characterization is what I would say is accurate. Like even when you're buying software, when you have incredibly complex context like we do with 37 different collective bargaining units with really, really complex policy, it's hard to just use systems as they are built. We are an incredibly complex context, and in order to implement technology in a complex context, you do a lot of customized things in order to meet the rules that you have, and then those things become hard to modernize and upgrade. And so we work incredibly closely with DoIT on that stuff. We also have an HRIS team specifically within HR who are sort of like experts in our process and our systems, and we work closely with DoIT every single day. But all of this to say, one of the things that we really try to do, aside from modernize, is when we can create more standard policy and more standard process so that it becomes much easier when we have to do things like upgrade our technology systems. And so that you see that in our bargaining, you see that in some of the ways that we write try to apply HR process more uniformly across the city. It's hard because you simultaneously want to do everything. Like, our workforce is not a monolith. They have entirely different needs. So all of this to say is it's a balancing act. It's one that we think about really, really hard every single day.
Yeah, one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly.
And there's probably a lot of square pegs trying to get into round holes there. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, see if I can find it. Do we do exit interviews? I think Councillor Mejia may have already had. Do we do exit interviews to figure out what was the issue with folks departing, or and any insights that they can bring to the table about what would make it better for the next other employees or whatever? And how do we track that?
Yeah, currently we don't do exit interviews writ large centrally. I know that there are some departments that do them on their own, but it's something that we are looking at creating a centralized process for.
And in particular departments, if there's a shortage, if there's a lot of vacancies, what's our policy to try and sort of accelerate or support that department to get more people? Or I know the the review process can be slow it down, but there are some times when the review process should actually speed the thing up, and in some cases, do we have that sort of flexibility to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like part of what the Personnel Review Committee is doing, and what all of us who are sort of administering this centrally is figuring out how to balance the sort of tyranny of the urgent, the places where we have the most operational need, with adhering to a process. So again, I would say it's a complicated story, but specifically we have realized, and I've said this in a few different ways, but there's not a one-size-fits-all for specific department needs. And so one of the things that specifically our people operations sort of strategy team, as well as the Office of Human Resources, has been able to do is dive deep with specific departments that are having those kind of issues. And we're realizing that, again, some people like to say, like, oh, if we just fixed residency, if we just fix X, Y, and Z, such a thing. But really, it's so much more tailored in terms of challenges. So we try to be tailored in our solutions as well.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of just retention, the folks, the H-1B folks, are we hoping that they will continue to be, it's a time limited thing? I know that because my time ran out. I had to do something. How do we capture that opportunity to retain those staff that have made a commitment to be here? We've done a lot of development with them. How do we? Is that a green card issue, or is it? Or how do we work to keep them on staff?
Yeah, I mean, this is all very new for us, right? Last year was the first full year of the program. Prior to that, it was a pilot. So I think this is just an area we're going to continue to grow and learn. So we'll continue to explore with our legal counsel of what the best way is to keep. But our intention, of course, by sponsoring them for the H-1B is that we want them here, we want them to stay. We find that they're valuable employees, and our hope is to continue to keep them here at the city.
And then in terms of recruitment from our talent pool in the city, our schools and whatever, are we really doing enough to educate young people in the schools about opportunities to develop a career in city government and all the different myriad opportunities and directions that they could go in to work as a city employee? Do we do that sort of outreach to our schools?
There is a lot of work that we do in that space, but I would say primarily that is a function of the Office of Worker Empowerment. They do a lot of the programs where they're directly partnering with BPS and helping them understand career options, which include working at the city.
Very good. Thank you. And I'm going to let the elections department off easy because we had a long conversation last week. So thank you to the elections department. You do a fabulous job and very professional, hardworking, and do a lot. The only thing I'd say, we'll try and get you some more money, maybe. And thank you also for your testimony and for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. The chair recognizes Councillor Mejia. Councillor, you have the floor.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to pick up where we left off, and because we usually do 3 rounds, so my last round will be the elections department because I still have to dig in a little bit deeper with some of the people culture situation here. I'm curious, how do you process complaints about people feeling intimidated or bullied, or yeah, how do you process those?
Yeah, so I think this is an area where I'm really proud of the progress that we've made. We have an employee relations team that now has it is a 4-person team that previously was one role. So having a sort of uniform process by which people could report any misconduct or discomfort or bullying in the workplace. Before, I would say the response times from the department were pretty long because we were very understaffed. So now with a 4-person team, we've built out tracking systems. We've built out way more standard operating procedures. We've trained all of our HR teams in how to do some of this work themselves. And so have a lot more, we have a standardized operating procedure where we didn't have that before. But to answer your question on a more granular level, if an employee feels like there has been any sort of misconduct or they're uncomfortable in the workplace, they can go to their centralized HR director, or they can come centrally to the Office of Human Resources and report it to our employee relations department. We will do, depending on the nature of the complaint, we will do an investigation.
Okay, so I'm going to just name a few things, just very generally speaking, especially because we are in election season right now. There are folks who have reported that they have been spoken to because they've liked other candidates' posts, or that they have uplifted other folks that the administration may not be in good favor of, and that is unacceptable, where people feel like they can't even be fully expressed with whatever political, affiliations they may have. That's not the culture that we should be creating in City Hall. And I think that if that is happening, because everybody has their own experience or interprets things however they choose to, I just want to name that that's really bad behavior, and people should be able to applaud or like after 5 o'clock, obviously, and on the weekends, but people should be able to fully be expressed, especially when it comes to things like that, because we don't want to create the environment that you have to be aligned with the administration at all times, because if you're not, then you're going to get alienated. That's not the culture that we want to create in this building, right?
I would agree that is not the culture we want to create.
Yeah, and anybody who's tuning in knows that we don't tolerate those things, right? So that they know that they can come to you and share their experiences, and you will do something about it, right?
So what I will say is that we have policies that govern the behavior in the workplace, and so if people bring us a complaint, we will investigate whether or not there is a policy violation.
Yep. Okay, so I'm doing my job. I asked the question, and that's all I can do, right? I'm not the investigator. These are just things that have been reported to me, and I can never confirm or deny those things, but it is my job to ask, and so I did that, and I appreciate you answering. So. But going back to the questions that I also want to dive in a little bit deeper, are you working alongside various departments to include non-traditional workers such as older workers and recent graduates? I find in the workforce, these are the folks that oftentimes don't have a lot of opportunity. So how are you, and through your work, what are you doing to increase capacity for non-traditional workers? And that means skewing a little bit older or someone with less experience. And then quickly, because I still got some more questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we do work closely with H-Strong. H-Strong does do a lot of referrals. I think H-Strong works specifically with departments as well to give them, they have a training on hiring non-traditional workers that I believe they've done with individual departments.
That's great. And for younger people?
Sorry?
For the younger people, the same?
Yeah, I think Alex spoke a little bit about, the work that we're trying to do in order to work with young people. Our central office has done a lot of work with our community colleges, so that's an area where we've definitely put in focus.
All right, so I'm going to go, okay. So this is going to be probably, Paul, because you work with the records department, you might also chime in here. This will be your opportunity to use the mic. And this is really about data collection. For employees, and the need to improve on that. I know you talked a little bit about that. Can you just for instance, earlier Council President Louis-Jean mentioned that taking a look at the diversity in the workforce on a deeper level, that takes into account people's tenure, whether or not they are managers, entry level, and so on. And so I'm wondering, disaggregating that data by department, is this something that we could look into doing better in? Don't answer that. That was just shaking your head is enough for me. Great.
Can I just quickly say that you can see some of that publicly available on the diversity dashboard? I just want the public to be aware.
Okay, look at her trying to use my time. I got you. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a very specific question on that same note on racial and gender data of employees. Are those subject to public record laws? We want to be really transparent about where our dollars are going, and we want to know per department who are the top earners, if they live in Boston, what race they are, and so on and so on, and and bring any of those discrepancies to light. I'm a firm believer, as someone who grew up here in the city of Boston, that Boston residents should always have top priority in terms of jobs. And so just curious about how can we have access to making sure that our top earners are, from Boston and not outside of Boston.
When you say from Boston?
That live in Boston. I know you guys do exemptions, some folks, right? Like some higher tier folks get exemptions to live outside for a little bit until they move here. But I'm just talking about the longevity of like folks who have, been here a long time.
So, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so when I talk about being from Boston, I'm talking about like, there are some folks who have big positions, who, mind you, they have nice degrees, and I have no problem with that. But there are folks who are making far more money than folks who have graduated from Boston Public Schools, have dedicated their lives to City Hall, and aren't even making half of the equation of folks who are in these top tier positions. And so when we're thinking about the role of just making sure that we're spreading the wealth, how much or what does those investments look like for Boston folks who have dedicated their lives and careers and education to Boston? That level of understanding is what I'd like to know.
So we have a residency requirement, so
That's fine. I understand that. So that's a requirement, but I'm talking about the top earners.
So, yes, we could certainly provide information about the top earners and provide information about where they live.
I would like to know that. I think that if we are serious about making sure that Boston is a place for everyone, then we need to start making sure that everyone who lives here and has grown up here can also stay here, because we're displacing a lot of our Boston residents because they can't afford to live here. And because they can't afford to live here, they can't afford to work here, right? And I think that there is a problem with that. And I think that we, at some point, need to really start taking ownership of that, because it's really difficult to see folks walking in these halls that barely know how to get on the number 28. And I think that makes other people feel like their employment status really doesn't mean much. And so I wanted to name that as something that we need to work on here as a council, right? Taking some responsibility for that. Alex, I worked on developing this Fair Chance Act so people can stay here. And I think that there is a level of angst, if you will, with some Bostonians who work here in this building that aren't even making half of what people are making at the top, but have been here for 30 years. And I think that there's an issue with that from a place of equity, regardless of what their race is. There's definitely an issue. And I think that we have an opportunity to reconcile with that in some way or another, in some shape or form. Because otherwise, we're just going to keep having the same conversations here, and people are not happy. And I know my time is up, and I'll wait for the third round.
The chair recognizes Council Mejia. Council Mejia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. You don't have questions?
I'm gonna let you, it feels like you're on a roll right now.
No, I feel like I'm just gonna, I feel like I get really passionate about this, right? Because I'm one of those individuals that had to work for everything that I have earned. And I think that there's a perception of this situation that I'm pointing out to, that hard work sometimes doesn't pay off, because people have been here for a long time and they have not been graduated to the positions and to the pay rate that they deserve. And I think that speaks volumes, and there's an issue of just privilege, that I would not be who I am if I didn't name it. And I'm struggling with that, because in some ways I feel responsible because I approve the budget every year. And then people are asking me, why is it unjust? And why do we have people who have been in this building for decades and have not been promoted to the positions that they deserve? And it hurts my heart to say I don't have an answer, other than let's keep trying, you know? But can you talk to me about the public, we did ask for some data around that. Is it a public request? Because the administration said that we were not allowed, that my 17F, which is a request for information, when we don't get the data that we need, we file something, and it was rejected. And so I want to know why it was rejected, and if we are being transparent, then the best way for us to fix things is for us to have information.
Absolutely. So I can speak specifically to the 17F. I believe that transparency and availability of data is incredibly important, and also the privacy of our employees is incredibly important. And so in response to that, we really want to balance those two things together. And so specifically, we do provide employee data publicly that includes information about earnings with individuals, their names, their position titles, and a whole bunch of other information. And then at an aggregate level, we provide race and gender by employee. You can sort by department, you can sort by tenure, you can sort by salary band, and if there are other forms of aggregate data, we are incredibly happy to provide it. We believe specifically that employees have a right to privacy, specifically around their individualized disclosure around race and gender data, and so that piece of it is where we applied a privacy exemption, which is how we have responded to all other open data requests, and that's just to respect the individual privacy of our employees. We know at this moment employees are being targeted in very specific ways, and we want to protect their privacy.
No, I appreciate that, and for the record, I want to protect our employees and their privacy. I think that's really key. But I just think that the dashboard sometimes is not really clear, and it's not easy to understand. And I don't want to have to figure out, like, trying to crack the Da Vinci Code just to get some information either. So if y'all can just package it up, it would be really helpful for us. Because I know that former counselors have received this data. I know Counselor Yancey has requested this. This was before our time, because before I was even. But I know he has asked for this data when he was in this chamber, and he was able to receive it. So I don't know what has changed since then. Maybe, I don't know, but apparently it does exist, and that you all can give it to us. But I'm gonna let it go there, and I'll just call Counselor Yancey and ask him what magic wand he used to get it, and who he had to fight for, because we want the data.
So what I would say is there's a chance that they applied that privacy exemption differently many, many years ago, but I think the environment around individual employee data has also changed in that time, and the laws have also probably changed.
Okay. All right, so for the record, I did ask. It's just times have changed. Okay, so I'm going to the elections. So I would say here, for as far as back, I believe as FY12, there has been underspending in the permanent employees category. And while not every year there has been overspending on overtime, this year, based on data from March 31st, 2025, the department is on track to underspend on permanent employees and has already overspent on overtime by $91,000. Is it because we need more people and we don't, where's that coming from?
A lot of our operation has changed significantly, and we are using resources from a variety of areas. So I know that we didn't start using poll workers until after we saw the implementation of vote by mail. So now to handle the expansion, because our operation grows and it shrinks depending on the time of the year, we're bringing in a lot more poll workers to help with that seasonal work. And I believe the overspending in the overtime is coming from that.
Okay. And I love the initiative around expanding it for young people, because that's also a way for us to increase civic engagement. And so, I mean, it's serving multiple purposes, right? It's great for the young people to earn, but they also get to learn. And so we should, all the money should go towards that, Counselor.
All of it?
All of it. Just the whole budget.
The 4.8 billion?
The whole lot of it, yes. So for FY26, how do you think we can adjust staffing to, around so that we can adjust the overtime? What would be helpful?
If I had my way, I would increase the full-time staff capacity.
Why don't you have your way? Isn't it your department? Shouldn't you be able to?
It is my department. So ideally, I think there's just a number of areas that we can improve, and that is just one area that we can definitely improve in, is just increasing the full-time staff members to just meet where we currently are with the increase in the workload. So there's just so many areas that we need to target, and that's one of many areas.
Right. And so for me, why I love these hearings is because my hope is that we can get to hear directly from the people who are on the front lines doing the work, right? Because the Office of Budget Management, they don't sit where you are. They don't know your day-to-day. They know your numbers, but I think that sometimes there's a disconnect with what it really needs. And so, Alex, you're the chief of this department now, right? So this is an area of advocacy that I think, if that's what they need, then who has the power to give it to them?
Yeah, absolutely. We've already advocated for a mid-year transfer to give this department technology. We're super excited that that's something the Budget Office has approved, and I look forward to closely partnering with this department to make sure they have the resources they need.
That's right. You got that on the record, y'all.
Absolutely.
You got an advocate here.
Counselor, just want to thank you as a person of color for bringing up the equity concerns, and appreciate your passion about that. And I wanted to say that we have here some high-level people who represent the entire spectrum of what you're talking about. So Sabino has lived in the city for 53 years and is a senior person. Commissioner Tavares is an immigrant and a leader in our city. And I can tell you that she got nothing as a handout and everything by hard work and ability. And myself, my parents work at a liquor store and a dry cleaners, and came here with one bag, and I don't know anyone here, but really proud to be here. So, I just hope that we can embody some of what you're talking about in terms of race and equity, and how Brenda and Alex have their own stories as well. So thank you for being an advocate for that, and just wanted to point out, I hope that we meet some of those criteria.
Yeah, and I like to see the commissioner and Sabino as chiefs, and telling me what to do. I want my people to grow higher. That's all. Thank you. Okay. So will you be voting on ranked choice? No, I will be voting. Not y'all. We will be voting on ranked choice on Wednesday. And as you know, I'm a very strong supporter of the initiative. But I've heard some concerns from some of my colleagues that this could somehow burden the elections department. And I really want to understand, because I never want to do something that has unintended consequences. Okay, so given that we are moving to vote on this issue tomorrow, we'd like to know from your department, what will you need to ensure that this transition towards ranked choice voting goes as smoothly if it passes? Like, it's really important for us to take responsibility and setting you all up for success. So this is an opportunity for, it may not be in the budget, but this is something that you need, and this is the best time for you all to say it, because Councilor President Louis Jean and myself, we are the sponsors of this, and we're in budget season. And so this is not, the price is right, you know, but this is really an opportunity for us to make sure that we're setting you up for success. So it would be really helpful to know what you need to make this run as smoothly as possible.
I think that would all depend on the version that is actually passed.
Yeah.
I have mentioned the need for newer voting equipment to speed up the processing time for ballots. I know one of the challenges that we faced during last year's election was the jams in the ballot machine. And with ranked choice voting, if we have a 2-page ballot using the current machine that we have, it's going to take even longer to process those ballots. Right now, it takes about 40 to 45 seconds to process the first page before you can feed the second page. And that process will take even longer with our current technology.
Okay, great. All right, so Councilor, Chief, Chair, we want more money for the elections department so they can manage ranked choice voting.
All right.
Okay, we got you. We got you. We got you. And I'm not gonna go through a third round.
No third round?
No, I'm not doing that. I think I've traumatized them enough, so I'm good.
Thank you, Councilman Mejia. I have one question, and it's something I've advocated for before when we passed CBAs. And I think one way, and I just want to just say thank you to the Labor Relations Department, Renee Bushy and Lou, for all the work that they do. I think one way that we can make some of these lower paying jobs more attractive and also help a lot of Bostonians is some of the benefits, whether it's tuition reimbursement, for that to transfer to some of the people in their households, whether it's their wife, their partner, their children. I think that is one way that we can make some of these more jobs more attractive, increase retention, but also help out in really a real social way, right? Knowing that some of these low-paying jobs, these families can't, afford a 4-year college. I think that will be tackling two things at once. So just some advocacy. Don't have to respond to it, but just want to put that on the record. I want to thank my colleagues for asking great questions. I want to thank their teams for preparing them. I also want to thank Central staff. I want to thank my panelists and your whole entire department. And I also want to just thank my team. And this hearing on docket number 0822 through 0830 is adjourned.